Hello there, welcome to my review of 1984's Terminator, the first film that James Cameron definitely directed on his own. There are conflicting stories about whether or not he directed the entirety of Piranha 2, The Spawning, and that film is certainly not his alone. The plot of this movie sees two time travellers arrive from 2029 to LA in 1984, and rather than go out and buy mint-in-the-box Transformers and pristine comics for the lucrative secondary market, they are there to find Sarah Connor, played by Linda Hamilton. One is soldier Kyle Reese, played by Michael Biehn. The other is a cybernetic assassin covered in organic skin, the T-800, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Reese is there to protect Connor. The T-800 is there to terminate her, as she will become the mother of John Connor, the hero of the Resistance in 2029, where artificial intelligence has taken over and waged a war against humanity that, thanks to John Connor, the robots have almost lost. Leaving this time travel mission as their last hope to defeat humanity, Skynet send the T-800 back in time. The T-800 relentlessly pursues Connor and Reese, who fall in love over the course of the film and have sex, leading to John being conceived. However, their joy is short-lived as the T-800 continues to try to fulfill his mission. 1984 was a big year for blockbuster films. So many of them would shape the popular culture landscape for decades to come, and Terminator is deservedly amongst that group. Made on a relatively low budget of around $7 million, it relied on James Cameron's guerrilla filmmaking origins and his ingenuity to look like a much more expensive film. And while some of the effects still look a little shoddy, as they did at the time, they never take you out of the film. At its heart, this is a straightforward chase movie, but like all of Cameron's work, it's everything else apart from the main plot that makes the film brilliant. When learning about film, you have one concept drummed into you constantly: the mise-en-scene, which in film terms basically means everything in a scene, all of the parts that aren't the plot, basically. It's something that no one thinks about when watching a film, but subconsciously you take it all in, and if something feels wrong, then the film might begin to fall apart for you. What Cameron does is take a simple story, add an original twist, and then layers of character building, themes, tension, and very cool action in perfect congruity in order to aid this mise-en-scene. The film sets out its stall from the beginning, with a scene of future Los Angeles combining model work, back projection, practical effects, and actors to show us a world that in less ambitious productions would just shoot in a quarry or derelict building. And while the on-screen text is perhaps superfluous, the opening shots tell us this is more than just another cheap sci-fi. The Brad Fiedel score also helps, being both ominous and hopeful at the same time as the credits roll. But we are then shown the contrast between the machines of the future and machines of the present, as it cuts to a garbage truck and we soon get a look at our villain. Arnold is perfect for this role at this time, looking somewhat unhuman, aided by having shaved eyebrows, and acting just slightly off. If there was any doubt, it quickly establishes him as the villain as he indiscriminately kills some punks and steals their clothes. We then are introduced to our hero, Kyle Reese, and the contrast couldn't be more stark. He emerges from the time travel weak and in pain, immediately pursued by cops and on the run. While the obvious storytelling device here is to show the villain as this inhuman Ubermensch, so he's established as a genuine threat to the relatively ordinary looking skinny guy and the waitress we're about to meet.
We're ready to order now.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, good.
But it's also a commentary on the concept of the male form. The robot skeleton beneath the Arnie skin is where all the strength of the machine comes from, and yet the machine that built it believed that it needed to appear externally strong and powerful. Throughout history, the appearance of strength has been equally or even more important than genuine strength, and that is reflected here. Cameron had originally cast Lance Henriksen as the T-800, which would have necessitated a different kind of display of a threat before recasting the role. So it really feels like an intentional decision from Cameron to have his villain be this testament to alpha males. This contrast between the T-800 and Reese continues throughout the film, as Reese has to try to beat the Terminator through outsmarting the killing machine. If it wasn't for the flash forwards of Kyle at war with the machines in the future, you'd be forgiven for thinking this was a slasher movie, as the Terminator works his way through a phone book, killing women named Sarah Connor as he goes, until he reaches the right one. This all changes when the Terminator finally catches up with the right Sarah Connor. But there is a beautiful scene just before this, where she realises people with her name are being targeted and she's next in the phone book. Then she spots Reese, and, because of his appearance and the way he's following her, thinks he's the killer, so does her best to shake him off. Obviously, we have more knowledge than her, and so are frustrated when she does this perfectly natural action. It's this constant ramping up of the tension that creates such a compelling film, and when the confrontation finally happens, we see the contrast in the hero and villain, as Kyle shepherds bystanders out of the way while the T-800 kills indiscriminately. It's at this point the film becomes a chase film, as they have to keep moving, only to run into various obstacles that slow them down. Cameron manages to keep the action of the chase fresh and the exposition fresh by combining the two, and not getting too bogged down in the technical aspects of time travel or alternate futures.
Are you saying it's from the future?
One possible future. From your point of view, I don't know tech stuff.
What's clear, even this early on in his career, is that Cameron is very anti-war and pro-nuclear disarmament, as the film is heavily critical of the machines of war we were building long before unmanned drones were a thing. And our destruction in the film is brought about by a nuclear holocaust. As the cops and psychologist of 1984 think Reese is crazy for suggesting that this is humanity's possible future, it feels like Cameron commenting on how, when we seemed on the brink of nuclear war, anyone raising concerns about this was considered equally crazy, and yet since documents have revealed just how close we came to annihilation on more than one occasion. This may have also been a more subtle suggestion of how society was so dismissive of environmental causes, which would become more explicit in Cameron's work later on, and is much more concerning to society now, but that is certainly not explicitly stated in this film. The movie isn't perfect. The romance between Sarah and Kyle is a little undercooked, and she falls for him perhaps a little too quickly. But I think he gets away with it by putting her in an intense situation where emotions are heightened, and it's not necessarily supposed to be the greatest romance the world has ever seen. It also helps that Michael Biehn gives a stellar performance throughout the film, and his emotional vulnerability when Sarah is falling for him is incredibly powerful. By contrast, while Sarah and Kyle get to know each other, we see the Terminator completely alone. And while that obviously makes sense, it also highlights what makes humanity worth fighting for: companionship and emotional intelligence. This was something that was the antithesis of the political mood at the time, where the messaging was all about there being no such thing as society, and the importance of looking after yourself above all else. If you want to take a message from this film at all, it's that you can choose to be alone, fixated on your goals, your mission, or you can use your time to form relationships with other people. But maybe that is me looking too much into it. Although those type of people often seem like unstoppable robots you can't escape from.
It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with.
So maybe I'm not so far off. I think what is undeniably great about this film though, and what elevates it above other similar movies of the time, is how much you can take from the film because of the mise-en-scene I described earlier. The themes beyond the basic plot, the way our main characters change each other by spending time with each other, deftly woven into the sci-fi action and horror elements that permeate through what could have been standard action fare. For me, the Terminator really allows James Cameron to set out his stall as a truly brilliant filmmaker. Thank you. Goodbye.